The night was cold, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes you crave warmth in any form. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, the steam rising in soft curls that fogged the window above the sink. My name is Clara, and at 44, I have worn the badge of single motherhood for most of my life. My son, Ethan, now 22, has been my anchor, my reason to keep moving forward through every storm. We've always been a team, just the two of us, navigating the world with a closeness that felt unbreakable. But that night, something shifted, though neither of us could have said exactly how. Ethan came home late, his shoulders slumped, his dark hair falling into his eyes. He looked exhausted in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. He'd been juggling a full-time job at the local bookstore and night classes at the community college, chasing a degree in literature. His passion for books was something we shared. But lately, I could see the weight of his ambitions pressing down on him, chipping away at the spark in his hazel eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I don't feel so great." My heart clenched. He sounded so much like the little boy I used to carry when fever stole his energy. "You look worn out, sweetheart. Why don't you lie down for a bit? My bed's warm, and this house is freezing tonight." Our old Victorian home, with its creaky floors and drafty windows, always took forever to heat in the winter. Ethan nodded, too tired to argue, and shuffled toward my bedroom. I followed, grabbing a heavy quilt from the linen closet, my maternal instincts flaring. All I wanted was to ease the strain I could see etched into his face. In my room, Ethan collapsed onto the bed, his tall frame sinking into the mattress. I draped the quilt over him, tucking it gently around his shoulders the way I used to when he was small. "Thanks, Mom," he murmured before closing his eyes. For a moment, it felt like any other night, me caring for him, him trusting me to make things better. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, a familiar warmth filling my heart. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater trying and failing to keep up with the cold. The silence pressed in, heavy and tender all at once. Without thinking too much about it, I lay down beside him, sharing the quilt, telling myself it was only to keep us both warm in the chilly room. It was nothing unusual, really. When he was younger, storms would send him running into my bed for comfort, and I would hold him until he drifted to sleep. The difference now was his size, his adulthood, and the long years that had passed between those moments and this one. Ethan shifted in his sleep, moving closer. His arm draped across me in the same unguarded way children cling to their mothers, even in dreams. My breath caught. Not out of fear, but from the sudden ache of memory. How many years had it been since I had felt this closeness, this reminder that no matter how grown he became, he was still, in so many ways, my boy? I lay still, torn between comfort and sorrow. His warmth enveloped me, but the thoughts in my head spun. He's grown now. He's fighting battles I can't fight for him. And soon, he won't need me like this anymore. The quilt held us both, heavy with warmth and history. I stared into the dark, listening to his breathing, and realized with a sting of bittersweet truth that motherhood is a series of quiet goodbyes. That night, under the weight of the quilt and the silence, I mourned the little boy I'd already lost to time, even as I held on to the man he was becoming. But in that moment, with Ethan's body so close, I felt something else. Not desire, no, nothing like that. It was something harder to name. A pull, a warmth, the fragile ache of realizing how much I still needed him, even though he was grown. It scared me to my core, because it reminded me how lonely I truly was. I hated myself for the thought, for even noticing the way his breath brushed my shoulder, the way his hand, resting lightly on my arm, reminded me of a time long gone when he reached for me without hesitation. I wanted to move, to shake the feeling away, but I couldn't. The silence was too heavy, the moment too raw. Ethan stirred. His head lifted slightly, his hazel eyes meeting mine. And what I saw there made my stomach twist. Not romance, not desire, something softer. Vulnerability. Weariness. The kind of look a child gives when they don't know where else to turn. "Mama," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Is this, okay? Just, being here? The question cracked something inside me. I opened my mouth to reassure him, to say of course, always, but the words stuck in my throat. I could only nod, a small, hesitant movement, though my heart screamed with so much more. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from my face with a gentleness that made my chest ache. Such a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of all the years between the boy he once was and the man he was becoming. I closed my eyes for a moment, willing myself to remember, he was still my son. He would always be my son. But oh, how cruel time was, pulling him further away from the little boy I used to carry on my hip. Then, just as quickly as the closeness had settled in, Ethan pulled back. He let out a shaky laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. His cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Sorry, Mom," he said softly. "I don't know what that was. I'm just so tired." The spell broke. Reality returned like a cold wind. I sat up, my hands trembling as I tried to steady my breathing. "It's okay, Ethan," I said, forcing a smile that felt brittle on my lips. "We're both just worn out. It's been a long day." But inside, it didn't feel okay. The air between us was charged, heavy with unspoken things I couldn't quite name. I wanted to reach out, to hug him and pretend nothing had shifted, but something had. Something I couldn't put back. Before I could say more, the doorbell rang, a sharp sound that sliced through the tension like a knife. I jumped, almost grateful for the interruption, and hurried to the door. It was our neighbor, Tom, a kind man in his late 50s with a weathered face and warm smile. He held a flashlight, his coat dusted with snow. "Hey, Clara," he said gently. "Saw your lights on. Just wanted to check in. It's bitter cold tonight, any trouble with the heater?" His concern was genuine, and for a moment, I felt grounded by his presence, as if his visit pulled me back into ordinary life. "Thanks, Tom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The heater's been acting up again. If you wouldn't mind taking a look." I stepped aside, letting him in, but I was acutely aware of Ethan standing in the hallway. His expression was unreadable, his jaw tight. His arms crossed over his chest. Tom knelt by the heater, his tools clinking softly as he worked. He asked me about Ethan's classes, about my job at the library, his voice calm and casual. I answered automatically, my words polite but distant, my thoughts elsewhere. Ethan stayed where he was, silent, watching. His eyes flicked between me and Tom, and something in his face unsettled me, a tension I couldn't decipher. Was it protectiveness? Jealousy? Or was I just projecting my own confusion onto him? The house felt heavier with every passing minute, as though all three of us were caught in some invisible current. And in the middle of it, I wanted to scream. To demand answers from myself, from Ethan, from life itself. How had something so ordinary, a cold night, a faulty heater, a son seeking rest, become so complicated, so fragile, so unbearably bittersweet? I kept my composure, smiling politely at Tom's jokes, pretending everything was fine. When he finally stood, brushing his hands on his jeans, he gave me a small nod. "All set, Clara. Call me if it acts up again." His eyes flicked toward Ethan, his smile faltering just slightly, as though he sensed the strange undercurrent in the room. I thanked him and walked him to the door. As it closed behind him, the silence returned, heavier than before. Ethan was still standing in the hallway, his posture rigid. "You okay?" I asked softly. He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just, didn't expect Tom to show up, that's all." His tone was clipped, and guilt prickled in my chest, though I wasn't sure why. I wanted to press him, to ask what was wrong, but before I could, he turned and walked to his room. The door closed with a quiet click that somehow felt final. I stood there for a long moment in the dim light of the living room, my heart heavy with a mixture of relief and dread. Tonight had unraveled something between us, something I couldn't name but couldn't ignore. Eventually, I made my way to my room and sank onto the bed. My thoughts were a tangled mess. I replayed every moment, Ethan's exhaustion, the way he leaned into me for comfort, the look in his eyes when he searched mine. Love for my son was the bedrock of my being, but loneliness and confusion pressed in, making me feel like a stranger in my own skin. A soft knock at the door startled me. My pulse quickened, a swirl of hope and fear in my chest. "Come in," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Ethan stepped inside, his expression guarded, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Mom," he said finally, his voice low, rough with weariness. "I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on with me. Earlier, it was weird. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." His words came haltingly, each one laced with frustration and vulnerability. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the same storm I was battling in my own way. I reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Ethan, it's okay," I said softly. "We're both tired. And maybe we're both just carrying things we don't know how to name. It's been just us for so long. Sometimes that makes everything feel complicated." My voice trembled, but I held his gaze, willing him to understand that I was as lost as he was. He nodded slowly, his eyes shining with something unspoken. "I don't want to mess this up," he whispered. You're everything to me." The rawness of his words hit me like a wave, and tears pricked my eyes. I wanted to promise him that nothing could break us, that no matter how messy things felt, we would figure it out. But my throat closed around the words. Instead, I took a deep breath. "Maybe we just need to take a step back," I said gently but firmly. "We don't have to have all the answers tonight. Let's just give it time." He nodded. And then, in a gesture that caught me completely off guard, he leaned his head against my shoulder, the way he used to when he was a little boy and storms rattled the windows. The familiarity of it warmed me, but beneath it was the reminder that things weren't the same anymore. I wrapped an arm around him, holding him close, my heart aching with both love and uncertainty. We sat like that for a long time, the silence between us no longer sharp, but fragile, like a bridge we were both afraid to cross. I knew we couldn't stay in that moment forever. Questions loomed, shadows lingered. But for now, it was enough just to hold on to each other, as though the simple act of not letting go could keep the world at bay. It was enough just to be there together, even if the path ahead was uncertain. Then came another knock at the door, sharp, insistent. I tensed, pulling away from Ethan, our eyes meeting in mutual surprise. My legs felt unsteady as I stood and opened the door. Tom was there again, his face etched with concern. "Clara, I'm sorry to barge in," he said, his voice urgent but kind. "You seemed off earlier. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I glanced back at Ethan. He was watching us, his expression unreadable. "We're fine, Tom," I said quickly, though my voice trembled. "Just a quiet night." Tom studied me for a long moment, then looked toward Ethan. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though he could sense the weight in the air, something unspoken that lingered between the walls of my old house. "All right," he said finally, though his tone carried a question he didn't voice. "I'm next door if you need me." He gave a small nod and turned back into the snow. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "maybe we shouldn't push this. Maybe we need time." His words mirrored my own unspoken thoughts. Relief and sorrow mingled inside me as I nodded. "You're right," I whispered. "We'll figure it out. We just need time." He nodded too, and for a moment we stood there in the dim hallway, the silence between us both a comfort and a barrier. When he finally turned to leave, I felt a pang of loss, but also, quietly, a flicker of hope. Whatever this was, however fragile and confusing, we would face it together. One step at a time. I sank onto the couch after he'd gone, the house once again quiet except for the steady hum of the old heater. My heart ached with the weight of the night, but beneath it all was something softer. The bond between us had been tested, stretched thin by loneliness and unspoken fears. but it hadn't broken. And maybe that was enough, for now.